Japan's new prime minister breaks decades of silence by openly saying a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger Japan's military intervention. 1 month later, a Chinese carrier strike group shows up east of Okinawa, launching nearly 100 sorties and allegedly locking its targeting radar onto Japanese jets. Coincidence? Hardly. These two moves, one political, one military, have sent shockwaves across East Asia and raised a much bigger question. Are China and Japan heading toward their most dangerous standoff in decades? Hi everyone, welcome back to Difference Frames the World, a channel that views the world from a different angle in our daily uploads. Today, we're unpacking more than just a tense naval encounter near Okinawa. We're also diving into a political moment in Tokyo that sent shockwaves across East Asia. In early November, Japan's leader made a bold statement about Taiwan, and just a month later, a Chinese carrier strike group staged what Japanese officials called dangerous air operations near Okinawa. The timing isn't a coincidence, and the combination has many people asking, what comes next? So, let's walk through what's going on, why it matters, and why it might reshape regional security dynamics for a while to come. Today's video is not alone, it is part of a series about the recent tension between China and Japan. Watch other videos of the series in the playlist we have pinned in the comments section below. Before we start, let us brief the two flashpoints, a seemingly slip of tongue in Parliament and an encounter of warplanes at sea. Imagine this, a high-stakes parliamentary session in Tokyo, where the newly appointed Prime Minister of Japan, a lady unprecedentedly put in this position, is asked what Tokyo would do if China used force against Taiwan. She replies that if the attack involves warships and military force, such as a blockade or an invasion, that could become a survival-threatening situation for Japan. When Japanese invaders seized China's northeastern provinces in the early 1930s, and when they attacked America's Pearl Harbor 10 years later, they used the same excuses. The new Japanese Prime Minister reminds Asian people of Japan's past atrocities, as she literally implies that Japan might respond militarily when Beijing wants to unite with the island by force. A month later, hundreds of miles away, a Chinese aircraft carrier group sails east of Okinawa. Its jets take off and land repeatedly, some say around 100 times over the weekend. Japanese F-15 fighters are scrambled to shadow the group. And on at least 2 occasions, Chinese carrier-based fighters allegedly direct their targeting radars at the Japanese jets, a move Japan condemns as dangerous, even provocative. The question isn't just did these events happen, but are they connected? Because, taken together, a hardline political statement from the Japanese leader, followed by aggressive naval signaling from a Chinese aircraft strike group near America's military bases on Okinawa, they look like two parts of a larger message involving Japan, China, and the United States. Sanai Takeuchi, newly installed as Japan's Prime Minister, the first-ever lady in such a position in Japan, a male-centered society, shocked many observers on November 7, 2025, during a session of Parliament's Budget Committee. Responding to a question about what would constitute a justification for Japan's military involvement, she didn't use vague diplomatic language. Instead, she offered a concrete scenario: if China were to attack Taiwan with warships or impose a blockade, that could become a survival-threatening situation for Japan. Why is the wording important? Because Japan's post-war security laws allow deployment of its self-defense forces under certain conditions, one of which is when the nation's survival is threatened. By naming Taiwan explicitly and linking it to possible Japanese military action, Takeuchi broke decades of strategic ambiguity. Previous Japanese leaders have avoided saying aloud what a Taiwan contingency might actually provoke. She did not. Her remarks triggered an immediate diplomatic firestorm. Beijing denounced them as provocations and interference in what China considers a core domestic issue. Within hours, a senior Chinese diplomat penned a violent, threatening post on social media, targeting Takeuchi personally. The post was deleted, but the damage was done. Tokyo lodged a formal protest. Media outlets across Asia and beyond began warning that Japan's post-war pacifist posture might be shifting. Takeuchi refused to back down. Though later she attempted some softening, saying she hadn't meant to commit to specific action, only to illustrate a worst-case scenario, the shift was still real. For many, it was the clearest signal yet that Tokyo may now view a Taiwan conflict as something that could drag Japan directly into war. And with that came a fresh wave of anxiety, not just in Beijing and Taipei, but across capitals from Washington to Canberra. Exactly 1 month later, on December 6, 2025, a carrier strike group from China, centered on the aircraft carrier Liaoning, sails east of the Okinawa Islands and into the Pacific. Its air wing ramps up, roughly 100 takeoffs and landings over the weekend. Standard naval training? Maybe. But what wasn't standard, and what Japan deemed alarming, was that when Tokyo scrambled F-15 jets and surveillance aircraft to monitor the group, 2 of the carrier's fighters reportedly aimed their fire control radars at the Japanese jets. That's not a casual gesture. That's a potential targeting move, what militaries call a radar lock or illumination. From a military standpoint, radar lock doesn't mean a missile was launched. But it does mean you are being targeted. In the tense waters around Okinawa, close to trade routes, close to Taiwan, and close to multiple national waters that matters. A misstep, a misinterpretation, or an accident could spark much greater drama. Japan responded publicly. It summoned China's ambassador, condemned the illuminations of its radar as dangerous and unacceptable, and vowed to monitor the Chinese military more closely. Beijing hit back, calling Japanese aircraft the ones interfering with legitimate exercises, and accused Tokyo of politicizing what they claimed were routine training operations. Given the backdrop, Takaichi's Taiwan comments still echoing, and Donald Trump just signed the new Taiwan bill into law, many analysts aren't buying the routine training explanation. Instead, they interpret the carrier moves as a calibrated show of strength, a warning shot, or a strategic message. We saw what you said. We have reach. We have the capability. China is not afraid of Japan, not afraid of the US, and not afraid of the two combined. Now comes a question: why does Japan feel especially alarmed? Let's address it in 3 areas: geography, history, and shifting posture. Japan's sensitivity here isn't random. A few layers make this fraught. First, geography and strategic choke points. Okinawa lies at a crossroads, near the Miyako Strait, a key passageway between the East China Sea and the Pacific. Ships moving between Taiwan, the Philippines, and the broader Pacific often go through nearby corridors. A carrier operating there isn't just near Japan, it's in a position that could threaten critical sea lanes, trade routes, or even approach areas close to Taiwan itself. Second, history and unresolved tensions. Tokyo and Beijing already have territorial disputes, for example, over the Diaoyu Islands, a fraught wartime legacy, and deep mutual distrust. Encounters, even if they are training flights, have in the past led to close calls. Radar locks raise concern precisely because past miscalculations have happened when militaries bumped up against each other. Third, evolving Japanese defense posture. Since 2015, Japan has adopted security legislation that loosens restrictions on the use of its military, under strict conditions. What was once unthinkable, such as Japanese forces intervening abroad, is now legally feasible if certain criteria are met. Takaichi's Taiwan remarks tap directly into those criteria, making explicit what had remained hypothetical for decades. Taken together, it isn't just another Asian naval exercise. It feels like a test, a demonstration of capability, a probe to see how Tokyo or Washington reacts. Now, what's at stake? Regional security, alliances, and the risk of miscalculation. Let's be clear, it isn't a declaration of war by any side. But it is a shifting of assumptions. For decades, many countries waited and hoped that tensions around Taiwan would be resolved without direct intervention. However, Japan's new posture, the explicit naming of Taiwan as a potential trigger, and changes that. Allies, adversaries, and third-party nations will have to reassess their calculations. Carrier strike groups, radar locks, and air patrols are no longer fringe events. They're becoming regular features of regional military diplomacy. That raises the risk of accidents, misreads, and unintended escalation. The waters around Taiwan and Okinawa are vital shipping routes. Any military standoff or even perceived risk could disrupt global trade, supply chains, and commodity flows, affecting more than just the countries directly involved. If Japan shifts closer to intervention, other countries, the United States, Australia, and Southeast Asian nations may be forced to clarify their positions. The balance between deterrence and provocation becomes all the harder to strike. To get a clearer picture of the tensions between Japan and China, we need to monitor the following moves by both parties. New statements from Tokyo or Beijing. Will Tokyo double down on its Taiwan warning? Will China issue more military or diplomatic signals? Watch for tone changes or firmer commitments. Further carrier or naval operations near the Okinawa or Taiwan routes. Repeated patterns, especially if their frequency increases, could signal a deliberate campaign rather than ad hoc deterrence. Responses from regional players. Allies like the US and Australia, as well as partners in Southeast Asia, will be watching closely. Their public or private reactions could shape how the region recalibrates. Accidents or close encounters. Even a single mid-air issue, a near collision, or a miscommunication could spiral out of control, especially if parties are already on edge. Domestic political shifts in Japan and China. Public opinion, parliamentary debates, or internal pushback could influence whether the rhetoric hardens or cools down. It isn't just perplexing geopolitics. It's a moment that could reshape the rules of security, diplomacy, and power in East Asia, with global implications. Whether you live in Tokyo, Taipei, Beijing, New York, or Toronto, decisions being made now could influence trade, global stability, and the balance of alliances for years. The risks aren't just about military escalation. They're about uncertainty, miscalculation, and the erosion of decades-long strategies built around restraint and diplomacy. Now, let us end the video with a question: why is China getting tougher with Japan, and why is a war in East Asia impending? Put your answers below.